Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material. So I want you to imagine watching a renowned, like this immensely wise teacher, right? And he walks up to a perfectly good boat.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and this boat is owned by these poor, hardworking fishermen. They completely rely on it to feed their families. And the teacher just looks at it and then deliberately smashes a hole right through the hull.
Just completely ruins their livelihood.
Exactly. I mean, you would probably think he had completely lost his mind or that he was just overtly cruel. But ancient commentators actually argue that this exact scenario holds the key to understanding how we process grief.
Oh.
Yeah, and how we handle sudden loss. It's about why our demand to always understand why something is happening right this very second might actually be the source of our deepest anxiety.
It is a striking image, and it perfectly captures what we are doing today. We are diving into a collection of ancient texts, specifically this highly detailed, historically grounded commentary on chapters 16 through 21 of the Qur'an.
Right, which covers a lot of ground.
It really does. And we are going to look past the surface of these super evocative narratives, stories of youths sleeping in caves for centuries, or staves turning into serpents.
Or bees getting divine inspiration.
Exactly. We're looking at the underlying mechanics of what these texts are actually trying to teach you about the human condition today.
I love that because, I mean, the titles of these chapters alone, like the bee, the Israelites, the cave, Mary, Taha, and the prophets, they sound like this wild mixture of natural history and ancient mythology.
They do, yeah.
But the commentary we are using, it acts as a bridge. It totally refuses to leave these ancient words stranded in the past. It looks at the historical context, the social realities, the linguistic nuances of the Arabic, and the geopolitical climate of the time.
Which is so necessary to actually grasp what's going on.
Right. And our goal today is to walk you across that bridge. We want to see how these ancient metaphors offer a surprisingly practical blueprint for navigating the overwhelm, the conflict, and just the sheer noise of the modern world.
Absolutely. So let's start with a foundational idea that just weaves through all of this, particularly in chapter 16 and chapter 21.
Okay, lay it on us.
There is this central argument that the physical world we see around us isn't just like a backdrop for our lives. It perfectly mirrors unseen spiritual and moral realities.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. The premise is basically that if you want to understand complex moral truths, you don't necessarily have to look up into the clouds or parse all this dense philosophy. You just have to observe nature.
That's a profound starting point. Yep. It fundamentally challenges how we usually categorize the world, It
really does. We love our categories.
We do. We tend to divide reality into completely separate physical and spiritual realms. Like, we assume they operate by entirely different rules. Science and nature are in one box, and morality, ethics, and spirituality are in another box entirely.
Right, the classic split.
Exactly. But the text argues that there is one unified framework governing both. Like, Chapter 16 is named The Bee on All in Arabic, and the title itself serves as this wild thesis statement.
It's such a specific choice for a title.
It is. The text points out that the bee gathers nectar from a vast array of different flowers to produce honey, which the text describes as a beverage of many colors in which there is healing for men.
Which is biologically true, yeah.
Right. But what is crucial here is how the bee does this. The text explicitly states that the bee is guided by revelation.
And that specific word choice just stands out immediately, because when you or I hear the word revelation, we typically picture a booming voice from the sky.
Or a prophet on a mountain burning bushes.
Exactly. A massive supernatural disruption of the natural order. But here, the text uses that exact concept, the Arabic word why, to describe the natural biological instinct of an insect.
Which just totally expands our definition of divine communication.
Completely. The commentary points out that revelation is not exclusively a singular supernatural event isolated in history. It's actually the fundamental operating system of the universe.
Okay, wait, unpack that a little bit.
Sure. So the bee's innate instinct to build intricate, geometrically perfect hives and to produce healing honey that is framed as a form of divine guidance. By introducing this physical reality, the text is laying the groundwork to explain a spiritual one.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Just as the bee is instinctively guided to extract what is sweet and life-giving from a complex, sometimes thorny environment to create physical healing, divine revelation in the human sphere does the same thing.
It's meant to collect the highest and noblest moral teachings to heal the spiritual and social diseases of humanity.
You nailed it. It's extracting the nectar of truth from the really complex landscape of human experience.
So we possess a sort of moral instinct that mirrors the bee's biological instinct. We are designed to seek out what is nourishing, even in a field full of weeds.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And it doesn't stop with the bee. There's another metaphor in chapter 16 that is just incredibly visceral. It's the parable of pure milk.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
It really is.
Okay.
The text describes the biological process of cattle producing milk. It says that from within their bellies, right from between the excrement and the blood, comes pure milk that is easy and agreeable to swallow.
It's a highly intentional, almost jarring image to read in a sacred text.
Totally.
The commentary draws a brilliant parallel here by asking us to look at the mechanics of digestion. An animal consumes food, and its complex internal systems go to work. It separates the nourishing, life-giving elements from the obnoxious, useless waste.
The blood and the dung.
Right. And what is produced at the end of this messy internal process is entirely pure and life-sustaining. The text argues that this physical reality is the perfect metaphor for how true wisdom operates within human society.
Because human society, let's be real, historically speaking, is incredibly messy. We corrupt things.
Exactly. Human history, our institutions, our traditions, political systems, they constantly corrupt pure ideas over time. We mix universal truths with the excrement of our own prejudices, our selfishness, our tribalism.
And our superstitions, yeah.
Precisely. So the function of renewed moral guidance, the function of true wisdom, is like that internal biological process of the cow. It enters into the messy, contaminated belly of human society.
It doesn't shy away from the blood and the waste.
No, it works right in the middle of it to distill out a pure, unadulterated moral code.
That entirely flips the common narrative about purity. I mean, usually we think of purity as requiring total isolation.
Right, like the monk on the mountain.
Exactly. If you want to be spiritually or morally pure, you need to retreat to a mountaintop, live in a monastery, or build a gated community to keep the world out. You avoid the blood and excrement of the real world.
But this metaphor says the exact opposite.
It does. The milk doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is processed through the waste. Wisdom is the ability to walk through the toxic realities of your workplace or the complex dynamics of your family.
Or the absolute mess of modern politics.
Yes, and still extract the pure, nourishing truth. You don't retreat from the mess, you learn to distill within it. I just love that reframing.
And if we pull the camera back even further, we see how this applies to the structure of reality itself. Like in chapter 21, the text uses this observation of the natural world to construct a massive logical argument for the unity of the cosmos.
Okay, how so?
The verse essentially states that if there were multiple gods, like multiple ultimate competing authorities in the heavens and the earth, the entire system would be in a state of catastrophic disorder and ruin.
I find this fascinating because it isn't presented merely as a dogmatic religious claim. It's a logical proof based on observable physics.
Which is such a modern way of thinking.
Right. Think of nature as an unimaginably complex, finely tuned machine. From the gravitational pull of the moon regulating the tides, to the delicate balance of the water cycle, to the precise mixture of gases in our atmosphere, everything operates with this seamless, integrated unity.
It's a single, cohesive system.
So if this physical machine operates with such precision under a single set of physical laws, why do we assume our moral, social, or psychological lives are meant to be random chaos?
That's the million-dollar question.
The physical unity implies a moral unity. If there's one law governing physics, there must be one underlying law governing human flourishing. Yeah, and it changes how you approach your daily decisions, doesn't it?
It really does. It removes the illusion of compartmentalization that we are just so fond of today. We love to categorize, like we said earlier.
We really do.
We think our professional life is governed by the rules of capitalism, our family life by the rules of psychology, and our internal ethical life by whatever personal philosophy we've cobbled together on a Sunday.
Just totally separate buckets.
Right. But this text argues for absolute, inescapable integration. Chapter 21 drives this home with another physical observation that doubles as a spiritual truth. It says, "We made from water every living thing."
a literal scientific fact. Water is the prerequisite for all biological life.
Yes, but the commentary notes the recurring metaphorical weight of this statement throughout the text. Water descending from the sky is constantly used as the primary analogy for divine knowledge or wisdom descending to humanity.
Oh, that makes sense.
Just as physical rain falls on dead, parched earth and brings forth lush, diverse vegetation, profound spiritual wisdom falls on a stagnant, deadened mind and revives it. It brings it back to life.
So let's look at the mechanics of a stagnant mind for a second. If you, listening right now, feel like a part of your life is currently a dead earth situation, maybe you are completely burned out creatively, or your empathy for others has dried up.
Or your sense of overarching purpose is just gone.
Yeah, exactly. The text is suggesting that you cannot revive that dead earth using only the dirt itself. You can't just think your way out of a spiritual drought using the same stagnant thoughts that got you there.
Right, you need an external input.
The nourishment, the water, has to come from a higher source outside of your current closed system.
That is the crucial takeaway. The physical world is constantly modeling how the moral and psychological world operates if we possess the framework to actually read it.
But we need the context to fully grasp it, right?
Exactly. Because to truly grasp the weight of these teachings, we cannot ignore the environment in which they were first delivered. These were not abstract philosophies debated by wealthy scholars in a comfortable, academic lounge.
Right. The historical context changes the resonance of everything we just talked about. Let's look at the backdrop of chapters 16 and 18. Most of these specific verses were revealed during the Meccan period of the Prophet Muhammad's life.
And this was a period of severe, brutal, and systemic persecution. The early Muslims in Mecca were a small, heavily marginalized minority who were challenging the entrenched economic and religious power structures of their city.
And the elites did not like that.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The response from the elite was ruthless. Believers were tortured, enslaved people who converted were killed, and the entire community was subjected to a crushing economic and social boycott.
It was a literal fight for survival.
It was. They were starved, marginalized, and eventually forced to flee their homes entirely, first migrating across the sea to Abyssinia and later making the Great Migration to Medina. So the words we are analyzing were given to a community intimately acquainted with trauma, displacement, and the very real threat of annihilation.
And it is precisely in the middle of that intense, terrifying persecution that chapter 18, the cave, is introduced.
Yeah.
The story of the dwellers of the cave is one of the most famous narratives in the text. It describes a group of righteous youths who live in an oppressive, tyrannical society that forces people to worship false idols.
Sound familiar?
Right. So to protect their beliefs, they flee the city, take refuge in a dark cave, and God puts them to sleep for hundreds of years. When they finally wake up, they discover that the oppressive society has completely crumbled, and their values have actually become the norm.
Which is a pretty wild story on the surface.
It is. Now, on a surface reading, this sounds like a classic fairy tale. It's a magic sleep used as a convenient plot device to escape the bad guys.
Yeah.
But the commentary we are referencing takes a completely different, deeply analytical route.
It really does. It offers a profoundly sociological and historical reading of the text, grounded in the specific linguistic roots of the Arabic words used.
Give us an example of that.
Well, for example, the word used for their sleep is rukud. This doesn't just mean literal snoring in a bed. It implies a state of being inactive, stagnant, or lying dormant. The commentary interprets this entire narrative of the cave historically, arguing that it represents the early centuries of the Christian movement.
Wait. I want to make sure we're tracking this carefully. The commentary on the Qur'an is arguing that the story of the cave is actually a historical metaphor describing the trajectory of early Christianity.
Yes, exactly. Think about the first few centuries of Christian history. It was an underground, heavily persecuted movement. Believers literally hid in the catacombs beneath Rome to escape imperial violence.
That's true.
The commentary links the concept of the cave to this era, and particularly to the later institution of monkery, the absolute seclusion from the world, the retreating to monasteries in the desert to avoid the brutal corruption of the Roman Empire.
Wow.
The sleep of the youths, this rukud, represents this long, multi-century period of historical dormancy. The movement was inactive in worldly affairs. It was hidden away, incubating in the dark.
But I have to question the premise here. Doesn't retreating to a cave, historically or personally, just sound like cowardice?
It can look like that, sure.
I mean, how does the commentary differentiate between a necessary strategic dormancy and simply giving up when the world gets too difficult to handle. If you're facing oppression, isn't the heroic thing to stand and fight rather than go to sleep in a cave?
That is the exact tension the text is addressing, and it's a great point. The commentary differentiates them by looking at the outcome and by understanding the mechanics of cultural incubation.
Cultural incubation, okay.
Right. Sometimes a righteous movement or a profound truth is so outnumbered, and the opposing power structure is so overwhelming that direct confrontation means complete annihilation. In those moments, retreat is not cowardice, it is preservation.
So the cave is a shield.
Yes, the cave is the environment where the core identity of the movement is protected from being assimilated or destroyed. But the crucial part of the story is that they do not stay in the cave forever.
Right, they eventually wake up.
Exactly. And the word used for their awakening is aikwas, which signifies being vigilant, alert, or active. The commentary argues that this sudden awakening represents the later history of Christianity, where the movement emerged from the catacombs and the monasteries and suddenly exploded into unprecedented worldly power.
Eventually dominating the very empire that had persecuted them.
Precisely. The text even mentions that those who prevailed over the youth's affairs said, "We will certainly raise a mosque or a monument, a place of worship over them." It is an observation of how a persecuted, dormant ideology can incubate in the dark and then awaken to become the dominant global power, building massive institutions.
Look at how that reframes the timeline of social change. For the persecuted Muslims in Mecca hearing this, it must have been an incredible mycological anchor.
A lifeline, really.
They were essentially being told, look at the long arc of history.
Yeah.
Righteous movements often have to go into the cave. They face periods of apparent death, utter stagnation, and total marginalization.
But that dormancy is not defeat.
Exactly. It is a necessary phase of survival. And if we apply that today, whether you are looking at broad social justice movements that seem stalled, or even your own personal struggles where you feel like you've been forced into retreat and your life is on pause, the lesson is that the cave is sometimes an incubator.
Progress is rarely a steady, visible upward climb.
It's so true. Sometimes it involves strategic retreat, conservation of energy, and long periods of waiting in the dark before the awakening.
It demands that we adopt a much longer view of time, and this necessity of taking the long view of understanding that immediate appearances are often deceiving perfectly bridges into what is perhaps the most intellectually challenging narrative in the entire text.
Oh, found later in chapter 18.
Yes, the journey of Moses and his mysterious, unnamed teacher.
This story is the ultimate test of the human demand for immediate answers. Moses, who is recognized across traditions as a massive historical figure, a great prophet, and the ultimate lawgiver, goes on a journey to seek higher knowledge.
He's looking for someone who knows more than he does.
Right. And he meets a servant of God, whom traditional commentators often call Khidir. Moses asks to follow him and learn from him. The teacher agrees, but he lays down one absolute non-negotiable condition.
And it's a tough one.
It really is. Moses must not question anything the teacher does, no matter how strange or wrong it seems, until the teacher decides to explain it.
Moses agrees, but he is fundamentally a man of law and justice. He is wired to identify wrong and call it out immediately.
He's a fixer.
He's a fixer. And what follows is a series of 3 incidents designed to completely shatter his and our reliance on immediate, surface-level judgment.
Let's walk through the mechanics of these 3 events, because they are incredibly frustrating to read. In the first incident, like we mentioned in the intro, Moses and the teacher get on a boat.
Right.
It's a perfectly good boat, owned by poor people who clearly rely on it for their survival. And while they're on it, the teacher deliberately damages the boat, scuttling it, making a hole in the hull. Moses predictably loses his mind.
He breaks a rule immediately.
He does. He says, "Did you make a hole in it to drown its people? You have done a grievous thing."
And we side with Moses here, naturally. To our eyes, this is sheer vandalism and cruelty against vulnerable people.
Absolutely.
But they move on. The second incident is even more shocking and deeply troubling. They meet a young boy, and the teacher commits a sudden, seemingly unprovoked act of lethal violence against the youth.
Which is just wow.
It is. Moses again objects vehemently, absolutely horrified, calling it a foul, unjustified deed.
And then they come to the third incident. They arrive at a town, exhausted and hungry. They ask the townspeople for basic hospitality, just some food. The townspeople are incredibly hostile. They flatly refuse to help them.
I mean, not very welcoming.
Not at all. Yet as they're leaving, the teacher notices a wall in this hostile town that is crumbling and about to collapse. Instead of walking away, he goes out of his way to painstakingly repair and rebuild the wall for free.
After they just denied them food.
Right. Moses is completely exhausted by the teacher's erratic behavior, and he essentially throws his hands up and says, "These people treated us like garbage. If you were going to do all this manual labor for them, you could have at least asked for a wage so we could buy some food."
At this point, Moses has failed the test of patience 3 times. He has demanded immediate, rational explanations for events that seem unjust, destructive, or entirely counterintuitive.
He just can't see the bigger picture.
He cannot see past the immediate material reality of the hole in the boat, the death of the youth, or the unrewarded labor. And this narrative is holding up a mirror to how we react to the apparent injustices, delays, and misfortunes in our own lives.
I demand to know why, and we demand to know it right now.
Exactly. We judge the universe based entirely on our immediate emotional and material reactions.
But then the teacher finally stops, and he reveals the hidden reality, the broader timeline behind every single apparent loss. Let's look at the reveals.
Okay, starting with the boat.
Right. He explains that the boat was damaged because a tyrant king was traveling down the river behind them, violently seizing every seaworthy boat by force. By putting a visible defect in the boat, the teacher made it undesirable to the tyrant.
He saved it.
He saved the poor people's livelihood in the long run by causing a minor repairable damage in the short term.
The second incident with the youth is perhaps the most difficult to process, but it serves as a profound philosophical metaphor. The teacher explains that the boy's nature was fundamentally corrupt, and he would have grown up to subject his deeply righteous parents to severe rebellion, ungodliness, and profound suffering.
And so it was actually a mercy.
Yes. The apparent tragedy of his death was actually a hidden mercy to the parents, saving them from a lifetime of spiritual and physical torment. The text adds that they would be granted a better, more compassionate child in his place.
That is heavy.
It is. It asks us to consider that sometimes what we perceive as an ultimate loss is preventing a far more devastating unseen catastrophe.
And the third incident, the wall in the hostile town. The teacher reveals that beneath that crumbling wall lay a hidden treasure belonging to 2 orphaned boys in the city. Their father had been a righteous, good man.
So if the wall fell?
If the wall had collapsed then, the hostile, greedy townspeople would have discovered the treasure and stolen it from the vulnerable orphans. The teacher rebuilt the wall so the treasure would remain hidden and protected until the orphans came of age and had the strength to claim their rightful inheritance.
The commentary draws a vital, overarching conclusion from this entire narrative. It states that these incidents are a manifestation of how divine wisdom, or the beneficent hand of nature, operates in the everyday life of humanity.
It's always working towards something.
It works to always direct humanity toward the goal of great good, but that goal must frequently and necessarily be reached through apparent loss. Sometimes the loss is only apparent and temporary, like the damaged boat. Sometimes it involves a real, painful loss to an individual for a greater, unseen good, as with the youth. And sometimes good deeds must be done without any immediate reward, and even in the face of hostility, to benefit a future generation, as with the wall.
If we bring this into the modern day, the applications are just everywhere. Think about the universal illusion of control we try to maintain. You get laid off from a job you love, or a major relationship suddenly ends.
In that moment, you are Moses on the boat.
Exactly. You feel completely devastated. You're angry. You feel the universe is fundamentally unjust. That is the hole in your hull. But then, months or years later, you find out that the company you were fired from was engaged in massive fraud, went bankrupt, and ruined the reputations of everyone who stayed.
Or you realize that the relationship that ended was masking deep incompatibilities that would have led to a miserable marriage.
Right. The apparent loss was actually the mechanics of a hidden rescue.
This narrative directly challenges our cultural anxiety. We live in an era that worships immediate transparency and instant gratification. If a package is delayed by an hour, we can track exactly where the truck is.
If we feel a pain, we can instantly search a medical database.
Right. If something goes wrong in our lives, we expect a push notification explaining exactly why it happened. But the story of Moses and the teacher asks us to humbly recognize the severe limitations of our own perspective.
We only ever have a piece of the puzzle.
We are only ever seeing a tiny fraction of the timeline.
Right.
We judge the totality of an event based solely on its immediate emotional impact. This text poses a profound question for the listener. How does your baseline anxiety change if you adopt the worldview that apparent disruptions, delays, or even losses might actually be the necessary friction of your own protection?
It requires a massive surrender of the ego. It requires the humility to say, I am operating with incomplete data.
Yeah.
And what I find so reassuring is that even Moses, a prophet, a man who spoke directly to the divine, struggled immensely with this.
It's a very human struggle.
It is. It gives us permission to be frustrated by the holes in our boats, but calls us to ultimately trust the broader process. Now, let's transition from these sweeping cosmic questions of fate and time to something hyper-practical.
I love the practical stuff.
Because these texts don't just deal with the grand arc of history. They get right up in your face about your daily habits and your interpersonal relationships. Let's look at the relational ethics laid out in chapters 17 and 19.
Chapter 17, The Israelites, contains a dense, profound section of moral precepts. It is essentially laying down the foundational law for a newly forming civilized society.
Big stuff.
Very big stuff. And intermixed with massive society-defining commandments: do not kill your children for fear of poverty, do not commit murder, do not consume the property of the orphan, fulfill your covenants. There is a commandment regarding the treatment of parents that is astonishing in its hyper-specificity and intimacy.
This is the part that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. Amidst these grand laws against murder and corruption, there is a rule about how you speak to your aging parents. The text says, if either or both of them reach old age with you, say not to them so much as oof, nor chide them, and speak to them a generous word.
It's so specific.
We usually expect ancient religious texts to deal with dramatic theatrical sins. But here, the text is literally commanding you not to roll your eyes and sigh at your parents.
Let's look at the linguistics of that.
Yeah.
The Arabic word used in the text is oof. It translates almost exactly to that universal human expression of slight disgust, impatience, or annoyance. Ugh.
The ultimate teenage sound.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that the text identifies the exact microscopic moment where relational breakdown begins. True relational decay doesn't usually begin with a massive betrayal or a screaming match.
It begins with the sigh.
It begins with the microexpression of contempt.
Modern psychology backs this up completely. John Gottman's famous research on marriage and relationships identified contempt, signaled by eye-rolling, sighing, and sneering, as the #1 predictor of relationship failure.
That's incredible.
Thousands of years ago, this text pinpointed the exact same mechanism.
And the commentary points out something even deeper regarding the structure of these verses. The commandment to show obedience and extreme kindness to parents is placed immediately adjacent to the commandment to submit to God.
Oh, I see. Why connect the two so closely?
Because the parents are the immediate, tangible, physical source of your existence and your early nurture. They provided for you when you were entirely helpless.
So there's a logic to it.
There is. The logic is, if you cannot maintain gratitude, patience, and basic respect for the tangible human beings who raised you, especially when they become elderly, vulnerable, and perhaps difficult to deal with, how can you possibly claim to possess higher moral virtues or gratitude toward an unseen creator?
Wow. It grounds your grand moral theories in the most difficult, practical reality. It's essentially saying, don't preach about your grand theories of global justice or your high-minded spiritual enlightenment if you can't get through a family dinner without scoffing at your mother.
The discipline of compassion doesn't start on a global stage.
It is forged in the living room.
And this leads perfectly into chapter 19, the chapter named Mary, which offers a masterclass in how to handle intense conflict, specifically through the story of Abraham and his father.
Abraham is such a huge figure.
He is the archetype of monotheism. He is the icon of breaking away from idolatry. But his father was an idolater, deeply entrenched in the polytheistic religious and economic system of his society. They had a fundamental, unbridgeable ideological disagreement about the very nature of reality.
Right, this wasn't a minor disagreement over politics or real estate. This was a disagreement over the ultimate truth of the universe.
It doesn't get bigger than that.
Abraham believes his father's practices were deeply wrong and spiritually dead. But look at the mechanics of how Abraham engages him. Even while entirely rejecting his father's worldview and systematically dismantling his arguments, Abraham repeatedly uses a specific term of endearment and respect.
He repeatedly says, "Oh, my sire." The text intentionally highlights Abraham's radical mildness. He says, "Oh, my sire, why do you worship what neither hears nor sees? Oh, my sire, to me has come knowledge which has not come to you, so follow me. Oh, my sire, serve not the devil."
So he's not backing down.
No, he is establishing a firm, impenetrable intellectual boundary, but he wraps that boundary in an incredibly tender delivery. Even when his father reacts with extreme hostility, rejects him, and literally threatens to stone him to death, Abraham does not retaliate with anger.
What does he say?
His final response is, "Peace be on you. I will pray my Lord to forgive you."
Think about the last time you sat across a table from a relative or a colleague who held a political or social worldview that you found entirely abhorrent. Our natural instinct is that if we strongly disagree with the idea, we must express contempt for the person holding it.
We constantly do that.
We conflate aggression with conviction. We think that if we are polite or mild, we are somehow compromising our truth or being weak.
It is a toxic confusion of terms. Abraham proves that you can hold an absolute, unwavering boundary regarding your principles while simultaneously maintaining absolute dignity and respect for the humanity of the person you are disagreeing with.
Which is so hard to do.
It is not just a moral nice to have, though. In a highly polarized, fractured society, this Abrahamic mildness is a vital survival skill for maintaining any semblance of relational fabric across deep ideological divides. It shows that truth does not require venom to be effective.
So if these teachings are so beneficial, if trusting the hidden process of the universe, practicing radical mildness, and observing the unity of nature lead to such clarity, why do we constantly resist them?
That is the big question.
What actually gets in our way? That brings us to the obstacles to growth, specifically the traps of material distraction and the illusion of self-sufficiency, which are heavily critiqued across chapters 16, 17, and 18.
The commentary addresses this human resistance head-on. It recognizes that human beings, whether in the ancient mercantile hub of Mecca or in our modern hyper-capitalist global culture, are deeply conditioned by the environments we build.
Right, our surroundings shape us.
We live in systems built on rapid accumulation. We are taught from birth that wealth equals security, and that if we accumulate enough resources, we become entirely self-sufficient. This creates a massive psychological barrier to the kind of spiritual and moral growth the text advocates.
Chapter 17 actually describes this barrier vividly.
It does, referring to a heaviness in their ears and coverings on their hearts that afflict those who desire only the present material life.
Let's look at the specific story in chapter 18 that illustrates this psychological trap perfectly. The parable of the two men. You have one man who has been granted two lush, incredibly fruitful gardens.
A very wealthy guy?
Exactly. The text describes vineyards, date palms, crops, and a river running right through the middle of his property. He has built the ultimate, robust financial portfolio. He has diversified his assets. He has a gated estate. He has total material security. And what does this wealth do to his psychology?
It induces a profound delusion of permanence. He walks into his garden, looks around at his accumulated wealth, and his ego expands to fill the space.
He starts believing his own hype.
He does. He declares, "I do not think that this will ever perish." And from that false sense of material permanence, he takes the fatal philosophical step. He says, "And I do not think the hour will come."
Ah, there it is.
Meaning, he denies any future accountability, any end to his existence, or any higher power that could disrupt his plans. He believes his wealth has made him immune to the laws of nature and time. His material success creates a complete sensory blockade. His ears are heavy, and he can no longer hear the truth about the fragile, temporary nature of human existence.
He assumes his net worth is his actual worth, and that his portfolio can protect him from reality. It's the universal illusion of control. When our lives are going perfectly, when our gardens are producing record yields, we become arrogant.
We start to think we created the soil and the sun.
Exactly. And of course, the text tells us that a calamity strikes, and his gardens are completely ruined overnight. The illusion is violently shattered. The obstacle here is our addiction to immediate material gratification and the false security it provides.
Which brings us directly back to chapter 16 and the text's relentless critique of idolatry. The Qur'an frequently condemns those who associate others with God.
Now, a modern secular listener might hear that and think, well, I don't bow down to wooden statues or stone idols, so this critique doesn't apply to me.
Right. They dismiss it as an ancient problem. But the commentary provides a much more sophisticated psychological definition of what an idol actually is. It defines these false gods as dead things. The text says they are dead, not living, and they know not when they shall be raised.
That completely flips the premise of what idolatry means in a modern context.
Yeah.
It isn't about ancient mythology. It's about what you treat as the ultimate, unquestionable authority in your daily life.
Precisely. Idolatry is about ultimate allegiance. If you make your career trajectory, your bank account balance, your political party's victory, or the approval and status of your peers the absolute center of your existence.
Which we all do to some extent.
If you are willing to sacrifice your internal ethics, your peace of mind, and your most precious relationships just to serve and maintain those things, then you are bowing to dead things.
Wow.
They are inanimate concepts. They cannot grant you true, enduring life. They cannot heal your spiritual or psychological diseases. And they are inherently temporary. They will eventually fade or be taken from you.
And the text even describes the psychological weight of this modern idolatry. It calls these false attachments burdens. The quote is, that they may bear their burdens entirely.
They weigh you down.
The text is offering a radically countercultural call to surrender the ego. It's warning you that the very things you are frantically accumulating because you think they bring security might actually be the heavyweights that are dragging you under.
It's a sobering thought.
If you want to experience the milk of wisdom or the water of spiritual revival, you have to identify the dead things you are worshiping and realize they are terrible, exhausting masters.
Uncovering that layer of meaning is exactly why reading these texts requires discernment and a willingness to look past a surface-level literalist interpretation.
Yes, which brings us to a crucial point about how to engage with ancient literature intelligently. Modern, scientifically minded listeners often hit a massive wall when they encounter the seemingly magical or supernatural elements in these texts.
It's a big stumbling block.
It is. How do we read them without feeling like we have to abandon our reason? Like if a rationalist picks up chapter 20, they read the story of Moses standing before Pharaoh. Moses throws down his wooden staff and it turns into a literal slithering serpent.
Yeah.
Then he draws his hand from his side and it is glowing, shining white. A modern reader is very likely to say, okay, this is ancient magic, it's folklore, I can't extract practical wisdom from a fairy tale.
But the commentary we are using provides an incredibly sophisticated framework for understanding these events.
Thank goodness, because I need it.
It does, because the commentary insists that these texts frequently use the language of allegory and metaphor to convey profound political, social, and psychological truths that literal language struggles to capture.
Okay, let's look at the staff of Moses then.
The commentary dives into the linguistic usage of the Arabic word for staff, asa. In classical Arabic poetry and rhetoric, a staff is often used metaphorically to represent a community, a state of reliance, or a cohesive argument.
So not just a stick.
Right. When Moses throws down his staff and it becomes a living, moving serpent, the commentary interprets this not as a parlor trick, but as a profound sociological indication. Moses' community, the Israelites, had been reduced to a state of complete intellectual death and stagnation under the brutal oppression of Pharaoh.
They were like dead wood.
Exactly. The miracle is that through Moses' guidance, this dead, enslaved community would soon be animated. They would become a living, dynamic, moving nation that would strike fear into the heart of the Egyptian empire.
That completely transforms how you read the narrative. It's no longer a magic trick meant to impress a king. It is a profound political prophecy about the mobilization of an oppressed people. The dead wood comes to life and challenges the empire.
And the white hand is interpreted in a similar vein. It is not viewed as a sudden skin condition or a glowing radioactive hand.
Good to know.
A white hand in Arabic idiom often signifies a shining argument. It represents an unassailable, logically clear, and morally pure demonstration of truth. Moses is being equipped not with magic tricks, but with an energized community and an undeniable moral argument.
Even more dramatically, look at the apocalyptic imagery at the end of chapter 18 and chapter 21, where the text speaks of Gog and Magog breaking forth from every elevated place.
Right. Gog and Magog are famous in pop culture, usually depicted as literal zombie hordes or demonic monsters trapped behind a giant iron wall at the edge of the world.
But the commentary provides a deeply grounded geopolitical reading of this imagery. It traces the linguistic roots and historical references, arguing that Gog and Magog referred to the mighty, cyclical conflict of great nations.
The clash of empires.
Yeah. Breaking forth from every elevated place signifies the assertion of absolute global dominance, military, economic, and political realm, by powerful, expanding empires. It is a description of world wars, of the clash of civilizations, of powerful nations rushing down from positions of power to consume resources and crash into one another.
It is a recurring historical pattern, not a sudden invasion of mythical beasts.
So if we look at the underlying mechanics of this interpretation, I have a question for you.
Okay, shoot.
If we view these miracles not as violations of the laws of physics, but as profound political, social, and psychological allegories, like a dead, oppressed community suddenly mobilizing and coming back to life, or the inevitable destructive clash of global superpowers, does that make the text less divine?
That's a great question.
Because some might argue that removing the magic removes the majesty. Or does it actually make the text infinitely more relevant to our modern political and social reality?
I would argue it makes the text exponentially more powerful and demanding of our attention. If it is just a magical event, it happened once in the distant past, the laws of physics were suspended, and all we can do today is marvel at it as a historical anomaly.
It has no practical application.
Right. But if these narratives are allegories for how truth confronts entrenched power, how oppressed communities mobilize, how human arrogance leads to the collapse of empires, and how history moves in cycles, then they describe recurring patterns.
They become tools.
They become tools we can use to analyze and understand the world we live in right now. My advice for anyone reading ancient wisdom is to read with a dual lens. Acknowledge the historical setting of the words, but look past the surface of the supernatural imagery. Search for the underlying principles of historical movement, ethical debate, and societal transformation. That is where the enduring, actionable wisdom lives.
Which brings us to the final insight of our deep dive today. As we look at these sweeping patterns of history and these intimate ethical commands, we want to look at a specific verse that connects everything we've discussed to the broader human family.
The big picture.
We find this in chapter 16. It is a beautifully expansive, almost shocking verse for its time that simply says, "And certainly we raised in every nation an apostle."
This single sentence is the cornerstone of the worldview presented in these chapters. The commentary specifically highlights this, pointing out that this verse establishes a broad humanitarian doctrine.
A broad humanitarian doctrine.
Yes. It is a direct, unambiguous refutation of any kind of spiritual or moral monopoly. It actively rejects the narrow, tribalistic view that divine providence, ultimate truth, or moral guidance was given exclusively to one specific group, one race, or one privileged nation, leaving the rest of humanity in the dark.
Think about the magnitude of that statement in the context of the ancient world. Ancient societies were heavily tribal. Gods were local. They belonged to a specific city-state or a specific bloodline.
Very insulated.
Right. To assert that the ultimate divine being has been communicating equally with all nations across all of human history is a radically inclusive idea. It's saying that God does not play favorites with geography or genetics.
Exactly. The commentary notes the logical consistency of this. It argues that it is fundamentally unreasonable to think a merciful, unified creator would provide physical sustenance like sun, rain, and resources to all people across the globe, but restricts spiritual and moral nourishment to a select few in the Middle East.
It wouldn't make sense.
No. Every nation, every culture, every civilization received its water from the sky. They all received the guidance necessary to cultivate their moral landscapes.
This is a massive paradigm shift for how we view other cultures. It tells you, the listener, that no matter what culture, religion, or philosophical tradition you happen to be studying, the fundamental pursuit of truth, justice, and moral guidance is a shared, universal human heritage.
It validates the exact thing we're doing with this deep dive.
We are seeking wisdom across time and borders, trusting that the honey of truth can be extracted from a vast variety of cultural flowers.
It creates a necessary framework for genuine respect among different traditions. If every nation had an apostle, if every people received a measure of this divine water, then the core ethical teachings we've discussed today are not alien concepts.
They're human concepts.
Exactly. The radical mildness of Abraham in the face of conflict, the necessary patience of Moses when facing the unknown, or the internal purity represented by the bee distilling honey, these are not proprietary religious doctrines. They are the innate language of the human soul, echoing across different traditions and times.
As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go back to your day. We started this deep dive with the imagery of the bee, and I want to end there. Look around at the nature of your life right now.
And by nature, you mean?
I don't just mean the trees outside your window or the weather. I mean the complex ecosystems you navigate daily, your workplace dynamics, your family conflicts, the unexpected disruptions to your plans, the boats in your life that seem to be sinking, or the walls you are being forced to build for people who don't even appreciate it.
We all have those.
We do. If the tiny, unassuming bee can instinctively navigate a complex, chaotic environment, landing on both the bitter and the beautiful flowers, and extract exactly what is needed to create sweet honey and profound healing, what might you extract from your current circumstances?
That's a powerful question.
What if you viewed the frustrations, the delays, and the chaos of your life not as random, cruel events, but as the raw, messy material from which you were meant to distill your own wisdom? The nectar is there, even in the weeds.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.